The autumn wind cut through the thin fabric of Mei Lin's worn jacket as she stood before the wooden gate of the Double R Ranch. Her hands trembled, not from the cold Montana air, but from hunger that had gnawed at her stomach for 7 long days. Behind her, pressed against her legs, stood her 6-year-old daughter Lily, whose dark eyes reflected the same hollow emptiness that Mei Lin felt deep in her bones. The ranch house loomed before them, its warm yellow light spilling from the windows like promises of safety. Smoke curled from the chimney, carrying the scent of burning wood that reminded Mei Lin of her childhood home in rural China, before everything had fallen apart. She closed her eyes for a moment, gathering the courage that had carried her thousands of miles from her homeland to this remote corner of America 3 months ago. Mei Lin had arrived in Montana with dreams as vast as the endless sky above. Her husband Chun had sent for her and Lily, after establishing what he claimed was a successful business importing goods from China. The letters had been full of hope, describing their new life in America where Lily could attend good schools and Mei Lin could finally rest after years of working in factories to support her family. But when Mei Lin and Lily stepped off the bus in the small town of Clearwater, Chun was nowhere to be found. The address he had given them led to an empty storefront, with broken windows and a "for rent" sign that had clearly been hanging there for months. The neighbors knew nothing about a Chinese businessman. It was as if Chun had simply vanished from the earth, with only $200 and a handful of English phrases. Mei Lin had rented a tiny room above the town's only Chinese restaurant. The elderly owner, Mrs. Wong, had taken pity on them and allowed Mei Lin to work in the kitchen for meals and a place to sleep. For 2 months, they had survived this way, with Mei Lin washing dishes and chopping vegetables while Lily played quietly in the corner, drawing pictures with crayons that Mrs. Wong had kindly provided. But last week, Mrs. Wong had suffered a heart attack. The restaurant closed indefinitely, and Mei Lin found herself once again with nowhere to turn. The other businesses in town were not hiring, especially someone whose English was limited and who had no legal work papers. The small amount of money she had saved quickly disappeared on food for Lily, and soon even that was gone. For the past week, Mei Lin had given every scrap of food to her daughter, telling her that she had already eaten while Lily was playing. She watched her little girl's face grow thinner each day, and the guilt ate at her more fiercely than the hunger. This morning, when Lily had asked for breakfast and there was nothing to give her, Mei Lin knew she had reached the end of her strength. That was when Mrs. Patterson from the grocery store had mentioned the widowed rancher who lived 15 miles outside town. "Sam Morrison lost his wife 2 years ago," she had said with sympathy in her voice. "He's a good man, helped many folks when times were hard. Lives alone on that big ranch now. Maybe he could use some help around the place." The walk to the ranch had taken Mei Lin and Lily nearly 4 hours. They had trudged along the dusty road, stopping frequently to rest when Lily's small legs grew tired. Mei Lin had carried her daughter on her back for the last mile, feeling her own energy drain away with each step. But the thought of Lily going another day without food had kept her moving forward. Now, standing at the gate of the Double R Ranch, Mei Lin felt the weight of desperation pressing down on her shoulders. She had never begged for anything in her life. In China, she had worked 2 jobs to support her family after her own parents died. She had sewn clothes by day and cleaned office buildings by night, saving every yuan to give Lily a better future. Pride had always been her companion, but pride could not feed a hungry child. The ranch spread out before them like something from a movie. Rolling pastures stretched toward distant mountains, and she could see cattle grazing peacefully in the fading light. A red barn stood to one side of the main house, and corrals held horses that lifted their heads curiously at the sight of strangers. It was beautiful in a way that made Mei Lin's heart ache with longing for the stability and peace that such a place represented. Lily tugged at her mother's jacket. "Mama, I'm so hungry," she whispered in Mandarin, her voice barely audible above the wind. Mei Lin knelt down and pulled her daughter close, breathing in the scent of her hair that still held traces of the jasmine shampoo they had used back in China. "I know, little flower," she murmured. "Mama is going to fix that right now?" She stood and approached the heavy wooden door of the farmhouse. Her hand shook as she raised it to knock, and she had to pause to steady herself. Through the windows, she could see the flicker of a television and the warm glow of lamps that spoke of a comfortable, lived-in home. The smell of cooking food drifted from somewhere inside, making her stomach clench with longing. Mei Lin knocked 3 times, the sound echoing across the quiet ranch. She heard footsteps inside, heavy boots on wooden floors, and then the porch light flickered on above her head. The door opened slowly, and she found herself looking up at a man who seemed to fill the entire doorframe. Sam Morrison was tall and broad-shouldered, with graying hair and deep lines around his eyes that spoke of years spent squinting into the sun. His hands were rough and calloused from ranch work, and he wore a faded flannel shirt over well-worn jeans. But it was his eyes that caught Mei Lin's attention. They were kind eyes, the color of storm clouds, and they held a gentleness that surprised her. For a moment neither of them spoke. Sam looked from Mei Lin to the little girl pressed against her side, and his expression softened. He could see the exhaustion in the woman's face, the way her clothes hung loose on her thin frame, and the desperate hope in her dark eyes. "I haven't tasted food in a week," Mei Lin whispered in her careful English, the words coming out in a rush before her courage could fail her. "Please, my daughter, she is very hungry." The admission hung in the air between them like a bridge waiting to be crossed. Mei Lin felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, but she forced herself to stand straight and meet Sam's gaze. She would not collapse now, not when Lily needed her to be strong. Sam Morrison had lived alone on his ranch for 2 years. Ever since cancer had taken his beloved wife Sarah, he had grown accustomed to the silence, to eating his meals alone while watching the news, to the empty spaces where Sarah's laughter used to fill the rooms. He had built walls around his heart, telling himself that the solitude was easier than risking the pain of losing someone else he cared about. But standing before him now was something that pierced through all his carefully constructed defenses. A mother and child, clearly at the end of their rope, asking not for money or handouts but simply for food. In the little girl's face he saw an echo of the daughter he and Sarah had never been able to have. And in the mother's eyes he recognized the fierce love that would sacrifice everything for a child's welfare. "Well," Sam said quietly, his voice rough with emotion he hadn't felt in months, "I was just sitting down to dinner. Seems like I made way too much food for just one person." He stepped back and opened the door wider, gesturing for them to come inside. "Please come in out of the cold. You both look like you could use a hot meal and a warm place to sit." Mei Lin felt her knees go weak with relief. "Thank you," she whispered, the words inadequate for the gratitude that flooded her heart. "Thank you so much." As they stepped across the threshold into the warm, welcoming ranch house, none of them could have imagined how this moment would change all their lives forever. The kitchen smelled of beef stew and fresh bread, and Lily's eyes went wide at the sight of the dining table set for one. With a pot of food still steaming on the stove, Sam quickly moved to set 2 more places at the table, his movements sure and practiced despite the emotion churning in his chest. "I'm Sam Morrison," he said, looking back at his unexpected guests. "And you are?" "I am Mei Lin," she replied, her hand resting protectively on her daughter's shoulder. "This is Lily. We come from China. We are looking for my husband, but—" Her voice trailed off. The pain of Chin's abandonment still too fresh to put into words. Sam nodded, understanding that there was a story there but not pushing for details. "Well, Mei Lin and Lily, welcome to the Double R Ranch. Why don't you both have a seat, and I'll dish up some of this stew. It's nothing fancy, but it's hot and filling." As Lily climbed onto one of the wooden chairs, her feet barely reaching the floor, Sam caught sight of how thin her small wrists were, how her clothes seemed to swallow her tiny frame. His jaw tightened with anger at whatever circumstances had brought them to this point, but he kept his voice gentle as he ladled the rich, hearty stew into bowls. Mei Lin watched as he placed a bowl in front of Lily, followed by a thick slice of buttered bread and a glass of cold milk. The little girl looked up at her mother with questioning eyes, as if she couldn't quite believe that food was really being offered to them freely. Go ahead. Little flower, Mei Lin said softly in Mandarin, then switched to English for Sam's benefit. She can eat. Lily picked up the spoon with trembling hands and took her first bite of the stew. The flavor seemed to awaken something in her that had been dormant for days, and she began to eat with the careful urgency of a child who had learned that food was precious and not to. Mei Lin woke to the sound of a rooster crowing and sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then the events of the previous evening came flooding back. The warm bed, the full stomach, the kind stranger who had taken them in without question. She turned to check on Lily, who was still sleeping peacefully beside her, and felt tears of gratitude prick at her eyes. From somewhere in the house came the smell of coffee and bacon, along with the sound of boots moving across wooden floors. Sam was already up, probably had been for hours if he followed the schedule of most ranchers she had heard about. Mei Lin slipped quietly out of bed, careful not to wake Lily, and padded to the window to look out at their surroundings in the full light of day. The Double R Ranch was even more beautiful than she had realized the night before. The pastures stretched as far as she could see, dotted with cattle that grazed peacefully in the morning sun. Horses stood in a nearby corral, their breath visible in small clouds in the crisp air. Beyond the immediate ranch buildings, mountains rose like ancient guardians against a sky so blue it made her heart ache with its vastness. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Mei Lin? Sam's voice called quietly. I've got breakfast ready if you folks are awake. No rush, though. We will be right there, Mei Lin called back, gently shaking Lily awake. Her daughter stirred and opened her eyes, blinking in confusion for a moment before a smile spread across her face as she remembered where they were. They dressed quickly in the same clothes they had worn the day before, and Mei Lin felt a flush of embarrassment at their appearance. She had always taken pride in being well-groomed and properly dressed, but their circumstances had made such luxuries impossible. Still, she smoothed down Lily's hair and straightened her own jacket as best she could before they made their way to the kitchen. Sam looked up from the stove as they entered, his weathered face creasing into a welcoming smile. Good morning, ladies. Hope you slept well. The kitchen table was set for 3, with plates of scrambled eggs, bacon, and toast already waiting. A pot of coffee sent up spirals of aromatic steam, and there was a glass of orange juice at Lily's place. You are very kind, Mei Lin said, still struggling with the generosity that seemed to come so naturally to this man. But you do not need to feed us again. You have already done so much. Nonsense, Sam replied, pulling out chairs for them. Can't have folks working on empty stomachs, and I'm hoping you might be willing to help me out around here today. Mei Lin felt her pulse quicken. You have work for us? Sam poured coffee into her cup and settled into his own chair. Truth is, this place has been getting away from me since Sarah died. She used to handle the house, the garden, the chickens, all the things I'm not much good at. I've been focused on keeping the cattle and horses healthy, but the rest has gone to pieces. He gestured toward the window that looked out over an overgrown vegetable garden and a chicken coop that clearly needed attention. I've got vegetables going to waste, chickens that aren't laying like they should because their coop is a mess, and a house that could use a woman's touch. If you're willing, I'd be grateful for the help, and I can pay fair wages. Mei Lin's heart soared with hope, but years of disappointment had taught her to be cautious. What kind of wages? She asked carefully. Room and board for both of you, plus $200 a week, Sam said without hesitation. I know it's not much, but it's honest work and you'd have a roof over your heads. $200 a week, plus free housing and food? It was more than Mei Lin had dared to hope for. In China, she had worked much harder for far less, and here she would have the security of knowing Lily was safe and fed every day. But still something nagged at her. It seemed too good to be true, and experience had taught her that such things usually were. Why? She asked bluntly. Why would you help strangers this way? You do not know us. We could be bad people. Sam was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee cup as if searching for the right words. When he looked up, there was pain in his storm-gray eyes. My wife and I, we always wanted children. Tried for years, but it never happened. Sarah used to say that maybe God had other plans for us. That maybe we were meant to help other folks' children instead. He glanced at Lily, who was carefully eating her eggs and listening even though she couldn't understand all the words. When I saw you two last night, I heard Sarah's voice in my head as clear as if she was standing right here. She would have brought you in without a second thought. Would have been planning how to help you get back on your feet before you'd even finished your first bowl of stew. Mei Lin felt tears threatening again at the raw honesty in his voice. Your wife, she sounds like she was a wonderful person. She was the best person I ever knew, Sam said simply. And I think she'd be pleased to see this old house filled with voices again, to have someone making use of her garden and taking care of her chickens. After breakfast, Sam gave them a tour of the property, explaining what needed to be done and showing them where everything was located. The chicken coop was indeed a disaster, with broken roosting bars and nesting boxes that hadn't been cleaned properly in months. The vegetable garden was overrun with weeds, though Mei Lin could see the potential beneath the neglect. Sarah had quite a green thumb, Sam explained as they walked between the overgrown rows. These tomatoes and peppers should have been harvested weeks ago, and there's squash and beans that are going to waste. She always said a garden was like a promise to the future, that you planted with hope and harvested with gratitude. Mei Lin knelt and pulled a few weeds away from a struggling tomato plant, her fingers instinctively knowing how to coax life back into the neglected vegetation. In China, my grandmother had a garden. She taught me that plants are like people. They need care and attention, but they also need space to grow in their own way. Sam watched as she gently supported a heavy tomato vine with her hands, seeing the natural knowledge in her movements. Looks like you've got your grandmother's touch. They spent the morning working together, with Lily helping by collecting the ripe vegetables that had been overlooked. Sam showed them how to gather eggs from the chickens, and Mei Lin was amazed by how many there were once the nesting boxes were properly cleaned and organized. By lunchtime, they had filled several baskets with tomatoes, peppers, squash, and other produce. This is enough vegetables for many meals, Mei Lin observed as they carried their harvest back to the house. More than I could eat in a month, Sam agreed. Sarah used to can and preserve the extra, but I never learned how. Been letting it all go to waste. I can teach you, Mei Lin offered. In China, we preserve vegetables for winter. My mother taught me when I was very young. That afternoon, Mei Lin took over the kitchen with a confidence that surprised Sam. She washed and sorted the vegetables with practiced efficiency, then began the process of making pickles and sauces with ingredients she found in Sarah's well-stocked pantry. The kitchen filled with the sounds and smells of serious cooking, something it hadn't experienced in over 2 years. Lily sat at the kitchen table, drawing pictures with crayons that Sam had found in a drawer. She drew the ranch house, the horses, and a family of 3 stick figures standing together under a smiling sun. When Sam saw the drawing, he felt something shift in his chest, a loosening of the tight knot of grief that had lived there since Sarah's death. As the days turned into weeks, a routine developed that felt as natural as breathing. Mei Lin woke early to tend the chickens and collect eggs, then worked in the garden while Lily helped with small tasks or played in the safely fenced yard. In the afternoons, she cooked meals that filled the house with incredible aromas, using the preserved vegetables and fresh ingredients from their revived garden. Sam found himself looking forward to mealtimes in a way he hadn't since Sarah's illness had begun. Mei Lin was an excellent cook, able to transform simple ingredients into dishes that were both comforting and exotic. She made soups that warmed him from the inside out, stir-fried vegetables that somehow tasted better than anything he remembered, and bread that was so good he found himself sneaking extra pieces when he thought no one was looking, more than the food. Though, it was the presence of life in his house that began to heal something deep in his soul. Lily's laughter as she chased the barn cats, Mei Lin's quiet humming as she worked in the kitchen, the sound of voices discussing the day's events over dinner. The Double R Ranch felt like a home again instead of just a place where he existed. Mei Lynn flourished in ways that surprised even herself. The work was hard but satisfying, and for the first time since arriving in America, she felt useful and valued. Sam treated her with respect and kindness, never making her feel like a charity case despite the circumstances of their arrival. He consulted her about decisions regarding the garden and the chickens, and gradually began asking her opinion about other aspects of ranch management as, "Well, you have good instincts," he told her one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. "Sarah would have liked you. She always said the best way to judge a person's character was to watch how they treated animals and plants." Lily was adapting to ranch life with the resilience of child. The words hung in the air between them like a bridge that neither quite knew how to cross. Mei Lin stared at Sam with wide eyes, certain she had misunderstood his English. Lily looked back and forth between the two adults, sensing the weight of the moment even though she couldn't grasp its meaning. "Married?" Mei Lin repeated slowly, as if testing the word on her tongue. Sam's weathered face flushed red, and he suddenly seemed as uncertain as a teenager asking someone to prom. "I know it sounds crazy. I know we barely know each other. But think about it practically. If we were married, you'd be a legal resident. You could work here without fear. Lily would have security and—" He trailed off, unable to voice the more personal reasons that had driven him to make such an impulsive suggestion. Mei Lin sank into one of the kitchen chairs, her mind reeling. Marriage to a stranger, even one as kind as Sam, went against everything she had been raised to believe about love and commitment. In China, marriages were built on foundations of family approval, shared history, and careful consideration. This felt like jumping off a cliff with no idea what lay below, but as she looked at Lily, who was watching them both with trusting eyes, practical concerns began to override romantic notions. Her daughter needed stability, education, and safety. The immigration officers would return eventually, and next time they might not be so easily fooled. How long could they keep running, keep hiding, keep living as shadows in a country that didn't want them? "It would not be a real marriage," she said carefully, testing the waters of this strange proposition. "It would be only for papers, yes? For legal reasons?" Something flickered across Sam's face too quickly for her to interpret. "Of course," he said, though his voice sounded oddly hollow. "Just a legal arrangement. You'd have your own room, your own space. Nothing would have to change except your status with the government." Over the next few days, they discussed the practical aspects of such an arrangement, with the careful politeness of two people negotiating a business contract. Sam contacted a lawyer who specialized in immigration law, explaining the situation in hypothetical terms. The lawyer confirmed that marriage to a U.S. citizen would indeed provide Mei Lin with a path to legal residency, though the process would involve interviews and scrutiny to ensure the marriage was legitimate. "The immigration officials will be looking for signs that it's a real relationship," the lawyer warned. "You'll need to be able to answer detailed questions about each other's habits, preferences, daily routines. Couples who live together naturally know these things, but if it seems rehearsed or fake, they'll deny the application." This led to a series of awkward conversations as Sam and Mei Lin tried to learn the kind of intimate details about each other that married couples would naturally know. Sam's favorite food? Pot roast with carrots and potatoes. The way Sarah used to make it, his daily routine, up at 5:30 to feed the animals. Coffee black, always checked the weather forecast twice. His biggest fear, losing the ranch that had been in his family for 3 generations. Mei Lin shared her own details reluctantly, feeling strange about revealing such personal information to someone she still thought of as her employer rather than a potential husband. Her favorite color, blue, like the sky over her grandmother's village. Her greatest worry that Lily would forget her Chinese heritage growing up in America. Her secret dream to one day have a garden large enough to grow all the vegetables from her childhood. Lily, meanwhile, seemed to sense that something important was being discussed but didn't fully understand what marriage meant. When Mei Lin finally explained that Sam might become her stepfather, the little girl's face lit up with joy. Like in the fairy tales? She asked excitedly. Will there be a wedding with a pretty dress? The innocent question brought home the reality of what they were contemplating. This wouldn't be a fairy tale wedding with love and romance and happily ever after. It would be a legal transaction designed to solve practical problems. Even if it felt like they were playing with forces they didn't fully understand. 2 weeks after the immigration officer's visit, Sam and Mei Lin found themselves standing in the courthouse in the county seat, filling out marriage license applications with shaking hands. The clerk, a cheerful woman in her 60s, chattered about the weather and asked if they were excited about their big day. Oh yes, Sam replied automatically, then caught Mei Lin's eye and saw his own nervousness reflected there. The ceremony itself was brief and businesslike, conducted by a justice of the peace who had performed thousands of such ceremonies and treated this one no differently than any other. Sam wore his best shirt and tie, while Mei Lin had bought a simple blue dress with some of her saved wages. Lily stood beside them in a white dress that Sam had insisted on buying her, clutching a small bouquet of wildflowers they had picked from the ranch that morning. Do you, Samuel Morrison, take Mei Lin Chun to be your lawfully wedded wife? The justice of the peace intoned. I do, Sam said, his voice steady despite the hammering of his heart. Do you, Mei Lin Chun, take Samuel Morrison to be your lawfully wedded husband? Mei Lin hesitated for just a moment, thinking of Chun and the dreams that had brought her to America. Of the grandmother who had raised her to believe in true love? Of all the ways this moment was different from what she had imagined her wedding day would be. Then she looked at Lily's shining face and thought about immigration officers and empty stomachs and nights spent sleeping in parks. I do, she said clearly. The rings they exchanged were simple. Gold bands purchased hastily that morning from a jewelry store near the courthouse. As Sam slipped the ring onto Mei Lin's finger, their eyes met and held for a moment longer than necessary. There was something in his gaze that made her breath catch, something that suggested this might not be quite as businesslike for him as they had agreed. After the ceremony, they drove back to the ranch in relative silence, each lost in their own thoughts about what they had just done. The legal paperwork would take time to process, but they were now officially married in the eyes of the law. Mei Lin Chen Morrison. The name felt strange and foreign on her tongue, but it also felt like safety, like belonging to something larger than her own fears and uncertainties. That evening, they celebrated with a special dinner that Mei Lin cooked using vegetables from Sarah's garden and beef from the ranch's own cattle. Lily chattered excitedly about being part of a real family now, while Sam and Mei Lin navigated the awkwardness of their new status with careful courtesy. As the weeks passed, they settled into a routine that felt both familiar and completely different. Officially, they were husband and wife, but practically nothing had changed. Sam still slept in the master bedroom while Mei Lin and Lily shared the guest room. They still worked together during the day and ate meals together, but now there was an undercurrent of awareness that hadn't existed before. The first test of their new status came a month later when immigration officials arrived for their scheduled interview. This time, Mei Lin answered the door as Mrs. Morrison, wearing her wedding ring and speaking with the confidence of someone who belonged exactly where she was. The interview was thorough and intense, with the officials asking detailed questions designed to trip up couples who were faking their relationship. What side of the bed did Sam sleep on? The left, closer to the door, because he liked to be able to get up quickly if there was trouble with the animals. What did Mei Lin do when she was worried? She cooked elaborate meals and cleaned the kitchen twice. How did they meet? She came to his door asking for help, and he gave it because that's what his wife Sarah would have wanted him to do. The honesty in their answers. The way they looked at each other when they spoke about their daily life together, and the obvious affection between Sam and Lily convinced the officials that this was indeed a legitimate marriage. 2 months later, Mei Lin received her permanent resident card in the mail, and for the first time since arriving in America, she felt truly secure, but security brought its own challenges. Now that they were legally married and Mei Lin's status was secure, the practical reasons for their arrangement had been fulfilled. The question that hung unspoken between them was, what now? The answer came gradually in small moments that neither of them planned but both cherished. Sam began teaching Mei Lin to ride horses, his strong hand steadying her when she felt uncertain in the saddle. She started preparing traditional Chinese dishes for him, sharing stories of her childhood as she showed him how to use chopsticks properly. Lily called him Papa Sam and climbed onto his lap while he read her bedtime stories, creating a family dynamic that felt natural despite its unconventional beginning. One evening in early spring, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Mei Lin found the courage to voice what had been growing in her heart for months. "Sam," she said quietly, "I need to tell you something." He turned to look at her, concern creasing his weathered features. "What is it?" "When we married, we said it was only for papers, only for legal reasons. But somewhere along the way, that changed for me." She took a shaky breath, terrified of his reaction but unable to keep living a lie. "I care for you. Not as a friend or employer, but as a woman cares for a man she loves." The silence that followed her,